Three, two, one.
Welcome to ASD Market Week's YouTube series, Retail Revelations Inside the Deal. This is your all-access pass to the world of buying and selling in the retail space. We're getting candid and having real conversations on what it takes to get the deal done. This is Retail Revelations Inside the Deal. Hello and welcome to Retail Revelations Inside the Deal. I'm your host, Stephanie Beringhele, and joining us today we have the Chief Revenue Officer, Paul Adamson, with Clover Returns Management Solutions. Paul, welcome to the show.
Hi, Stephanie. Thank you for having me.
I'm very excited. So the last time you and I were able to talk, it was actually at ASD Market Week in person. So today I get the pleasure of digging into all your secrets and finding out the beautiful world
Nice.
of returns.
Perfect. I look forward to sharing some stuff and hopefully the audience can relate to some of it and maybe learn a few things. So I'm very excited. Thank you.
Well, it's a hot topic. I'll tell you that. This industry is craving it. So I want to dig in before we go over the details of this industry. Tell us a little bit about you and a little bit more about Clover.
Sure. So as you said, I'm Paul Adamson. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Clover Returns Management Solutions, which is the returns focused business unit of Clover Environmental Solutions. I've spent my entire professional career in reverse, so 30 plus years of being a degenerate on the reverse side of the world, to the extent that it's very difficult for me to even buy brand new products because in the back of my mind, I always know somebody who must have the refurbished version of it. The beauty about Clover, so we have two main operating units, both centered on creating sustainable products. So Clover Imaging is the world's largest remanufacturer of ink and toner, supporting nearly every major retailer and office product store in North America. And then on the Clover RMS side, we work directly with top tier consumer brands across six primary categories. So floor care, countertop appliance, home automation, consumer electronics, power tools, and home environment. And really, what sets us apart in the space is really our focus on full cycle returns management. Basically, we're helping brands turn product returns into insight, revenue, and an environmental win. So all of our clients are, leaders in their category, and they're really choosing to rethink returns as a competitive advantage, which I'm sure as we dig in today is even more important than it has been in the past.
So talk to me, how does one get into the return space? You didn't just wake up one day and said, "Oh, I want to help save the universe and give an extra life to product." How did how
Sure.
did this come about?
So I answered a phone call when I was an assistant manager at a Radio Shack store in Manchester, New Hampshire, from a company that was trying to source a Grid computer part. So Grid was an operating unit of Tandy back in the day, which was owned by Radio Shack, and they just were commercial computers only. And I was able to, through some finagling internally, locate the part they needed, sell it to them, and then rinse and repeat. They kept calling for more parts. They were what at the time was called a third party maintenance company, so supporting those who needed parts out in the world. And eventually, they just offered me a job. They said, "You obviously can find stuff. Would you like to come work for us?" And it just opened my eyes to a totally different path from a career standpoint. And it's just exciting, once you start to understand the world of parts support and after sales support and electronics recycling and remanufacturing at scale. And it's just fun, you know and I also try to make sure people understand, at the end of the day, we're not saving babies, right?
No.
So you can take it super serious, right? And what we're doing is good stuff, right? At the end of the day, we're diverting so much product from landfill,
Mhm.
but i- if it stresses you out too much, you're letting it get to you, and you just need to remember it's still somebody's vacuum, that got returned. It's okay.
There's such value in product, and I think for the longest time, companies didn't know what to do with product, so they would find it, "We're just gonna throw it away." And then other
Mhm.
people said, "Wait a minute, there's still some life value on this product, and we know people who will purchase it." Great example is I went to the NRF show in New York back in 2022, and the hot topic was recycle, reuse, circular. And you had major companies like IKEA who said, wait a minute, there's people that have furniture that it's still good furniture. It just needs to be refurbished a little bit. But someone
Hmm.
else is going to come through those doors and they're going to say, "Oh, that couch is only 250 and it's perfect for me." And then while they're there, they're going to go ahead and they're going to maybe buy the new pillows and the new
Hmm.
flower vase or whatever it is. So they had people coming through their doors. They could upsell them, but there was that new business element that was really intriguing. So tell me about how your company is providing that service for larger companies to realize the potential in product and having a second life.
Sure. And I love that you brought up IKEA, right? Because that box assemble type furniture. I think it took them a little while to realize that they could set up their buyback program from consumers and for that second life, even on something like um, you know a product that you put together based on some stick figures and a manual, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, if it can apply there, you can find value in most other products, and that's what we're typically doing, right? So my role is almost a mix of it really is a mix of business development and consultative selling and teaching all at the same time, right? So for us, we typically are engaging with a vast array of the internal teams at the clients we serve, right? So we're engaging with the quality teams, the new product development teams, the finance, the sales, logistics, and more, because each of them has kind of a different uh, stick that they want to be able to hit and connect a ball with. So it might be the CX team is most interested in rationalizing some of the CX feedback that they get. So that's part of what we do, right? We can talk about that later in detail. I can go on ad nauseum about it, but it's a lot of times it's helping them understand that if they don't have a returns program in place, it's the old statement of making no decision is still a decision. So if they've chosen to let that product stay out in the market, whether it's the retailer controlling it or the consumer just being left behind and holding on to it, they've still decided something, and that something is to allow their brand to be managed by somebody else. And that can be very scary. If you've taken your time to build a fantastic brand name, you want to control that returned product. Now, you might not know how to go and enable that reverse logistics cycle, what the best way is to handle that product, what you really want to do with it post refurb or remanufacturing, but you still need to put some thought into it. So we spend a lot of times really educating clients if they don't have a process today, why it's important and what might be happening to their product if they're not putting a program in place. And then if they do have something in place, ways to improve it. Some
Mhm.
will have an internal process, but we try to help them understand be what you are, right? You're a design, engineering, and marketing company. What you're not is somebody who's used to taking mixed pallets of gross stuff and turning it into one, quantitative data that can help your engineering and FA folks, and two, product that can go into a new channel, which I think is probably one of the more exciting things too, to introduce your products to a new buyer set.
Mhm.
And and it really is, if you think about the origins of like the auto industry, and you'd have your multiple tiers of autos, right? You'd step in at a Ford level, but eventually you could move it into a Lincoln, or in the GM world you go a Chevy to a GMC to a Cadillac. It can be that same thing for a quality factory certified refurbished product, because it'll let somebody be aspirational and buy a product that normally they wouldn't be able to acquire, right? And that was a lot of the concerns from a just an education standpoint is this going to hurt my market? Am I essentially just taking away a new product sale? And you're not. The studies have shown, we've got so many different reference points around it, that buyer, their decision was not your product, or the refurbished version. It was a refurbished version or a cheaper version, not sold by you. And so, you can get them used to being part of the family. And when they have more disposable income, they'll buy the new version of your product.
It's so good because I think you understand the pain point or the concern of these companies. And by understanding that that's the starting point, and then probably going into here's the misconception about the industry, and here's how we're going to elevate it so that your brand stays true. But again, you get an opportunity to get that buy in for this second market. It's so important. So, for the obstacles that you face, what are some of the major ones currently? Because I'm sure that things have gotten a little bit easier. I think more people are leaning towards, yes, this is actually a great part of business that we can do. But what are still some of those obstacles, and what do you do to try to alleviate their concerns to get them over the hurdle?
So it's really about understanding who's driving the internal decision, right? So if it's finance, they're typically just want to understand, how do you monetize this
Mhm.
return? How am I reducing my cost to serve returns? And so, that it's a math problem at that point. Really, we're walking them through, what is your cost to leave it behind? What are you paying the retailer to process that unit? What's your missed opportunity? And here's your cost structure if you were going to bring it back in. You're going to have, transportation costs. You're going to have transformation costs, whether that's repair, refurb, remanufacturing of that product. And then you're going to have some level of re-commerce cost, right, to get that product back in the market. But in the meantime, you're also capturing usage data, performance data, return data, that is highly valuable. Today we have, clients across the spectrum that drive their programs in different ways. Whether they're financially motivated, they need to monetize that return to the highest level. Well, in those cases, we may have two different grades of product for them, right? We might produce a refurbished product that's like new, and one that's cosmetically blemished, so they can sell more of that refurbished good. For others, one, they only want the highest quality product going back out in the market. And then we have a third set that is just data driven. They don't
Mhm.
actually care about monetizing the return again. They're just rabid for the data that we can go and collect from that returned product. And it's so interesting because, yeah, we do so much work, kind of in these three buckets that we refer to as, pre-market, new to market, and in market. And each one has its, really different tells that we can then share back with the brand owners. And they're so interested about that, it just got into market, right? It's new to market. What happened with those first 100 you got in? How did they perform? How had they been used? How many of them appeared to have just never been opened? And we can then start to shape the conversation, because it might be something as simple as, you know we did this complete analysis on your first 100 returns, and overall the product's great, but your user's manual is terrible. Your font's too small, or I love QR codes and I love the ability to go online and go see a video, but there is a subset of buyers that they're never going to go online to watch that video of how to use the product. And so we can give them that feedback, and we call that the triangulation benefit, right? So we're taking, about 70% of what you can learn from a return comes from the physical product that we're touching. About another 20% is coming through your CX data that we want to ingest. And the last 10 typically is from, search and social media. What are people saying about your product? And so we're trying to help them understand, there's things that, is, maybe an issue with your product, the known knowns, right? But what we want to do is we want to uncover the either the known unknowns or the unknown unknowns, things that you didn't even know what could be an issue. Something as simple just came up the other day where one of the floor care brands, because we process, thousands of robot vacuums a day. Well, we identified that their app had suddenly changed and you couldn't do a factory reset anymore on it to clear the
Oh,
data, which for the average consumer, they're not going to do that, right? But somebody had made a change, right, to the app, and it had broken that ability. And so it's little things like, hey, you want to protect, personally identifiable information, and so that consumer needs to be able to wipe it if they want to in the future. And on the return side, we definitely have to be able to.
yeah.
So super long answer for you on that one, but it's really targeted based on what's the need of that client. What is their focus? Is it because they're just driven by sustainability? Are they just trying to close a gap? Do they want to create new channels? we have a lot of clients that are very interested in not necessarily selling that refurbished or remanufactured product back in the US, but creating new channels in other countries to introduce their products. Maybe they don't have a path yet for new there from distribution,
Mhm.
but we can help them on the refurb side.
It's so interesting because I didn't think about it before until you said it, but I'm one of those consumers where if I can't make it work or if I can't build it, first
Yeah.
thing I'm gonna say, "Get rid of it." I'm not even gonna try because I don't want my husband to be irritated. I'm gonna say, too hard. And there's been so many times where, we got my son a basketball hoop and Santa was going to build
Mhm.
it for him. Nope, Santa didn't come through. Sorry, dude. But we weren't able to build it because it was too complicated. And so it went back.
Yep.
So I didn't even think about that component. And that's great advice that you can then go back to a client and say, the data is telling us specifically that this isn't working, not because it's not a great product, but you don't have the right tools to equip that consumer to build it. And that's a major component and it's it irks me factor.
100%. The irk factor. I may have to have the guys start integrating that into our
Yeah.
report back. Irk factor scale, 5 irks, something like that.
So with the product that you work with, so you talked a little bit about the robotic guy that sucks all the dirt up on the ground and stuff like that. Do you ever work with bigger items like a refrigerator or a washing machine or anything like that? Do you guys handle some of that stuff?
So we did in the past, we did full size appliance, but now we stick with, it's a very simple logic. If a consumer can pick that up and put it in a
Mhm.
shopping cart, typically it's someone we're going to engage with. The one difference is in our home environment. So we're the returns partner for LG electronics for all their room air conditioning products.
Okay.
So typically you're not picking up an AC by yourself,
Yeah.
especially on the bigger ones. So that one breaks the rule. Yeah, but all sorts of countertop appliance, for sure. Premium stuff like GE Opal ice makers and those type of items, are in our wheelhouse. The bigger stuff, that model from a return standpoint, that is typically liquidated
Mhm.
or repaired on site. So, that model today is not really a return to a centralized refurb house. They've all the different brands have played with the different models over the years. And for the most part, they've just landed on it's scratch and dent. I'm going to liquidate it and try to get somewhere between 22 and 35 cents on the dollar back out of it going into the liquidation market.
I was curious because I have a broken refrigerator, and I know that if I get somebody to come, like a handyman to come and try to fix it, he for $300 he's going to tell me I can't do it. It's outdated. I don't have the part, and then it becomes, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I should have taken that 350 and bought a used product, and then sold my old unit for somebody else to refurbish, and then I probably would have made out a little bit more even. But that's very smart because I think that introduces a component where it's more consumer friendly, and I think you guys have what, 10 distribution centers throughout the US?
So
How many
four.
warehouses?
Yeah,
4,
so
okay,
four in the US. So we've got four return consolidation and distribution centers. So Augusta, Georgia, Farmingdale, New Jersey, Ottawa, Illinois, Calexico, California, and then our big remanufacturing facility, Nearshore in Mexicali, Mexico.
okay.
So about 1 million square feet here in the US and 650,000 square feet down in Mexicali.
It positions you very well because you and I were talking about it earlier. There's been a lot of headlines lately, and there are
Oh,
tariffs
yeah.
and uncertainty, which makes what you do so valuable for the industry. And again, I think more retailers are going to open their eyes to see the opportunities. So, how do you view this whole tariff and uncertainty within the retail space?
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I feel like it's the question that comes up every day these days, right? I mean, the last 100 days really just a whirlwind for any of our client partners,
Mhm.
right? Supply chain disruptions, tariffs, geopolitical things, whatever's going on. And the only constant is, are the mature brands. They recognize that those return goods, they're not a liability, they're a domestic asset, right?
Mhm.
It's already in country, it's tariff free at this point, and so it's just potential, right? Yeah, it's something they can go drive. So, yeah, we're our clients are really focused now on how can I get you more parts to improve my sellable yield because those parts get to come in bond and then cross into Mexicali and be used in the remanufacturing process or the refurbishment process. So it's much cheaper than sending in that new product. Or what can
Yeah.
you harvest from my failed units that I can then use for service parts in the US? So it's interesting to see some of the lights really clicking on being better focused on, especially the parts planning side. Where we've historically said, "Hey, if you could help us get this item, in country, we'd be able to improve the yield by this much." And now they're very interested in that. So the other part, right, is kind of growing interest, in nearshoring, right? How do I get out of China into places like Mexico? And so I feel like it's every week right now, modeling what it would mean to have, inventory that's just a highway away instead of an ocean away. And we've always thought, right, there shouldn't be any better manufacturer than a remanufacturer.
That's
You
right.
know, because if we can touch it and make it better when it's gross and used, man, give us brand new things that we're going to put together. It's a win-win. So we're always looking at how do we build kind of that circular partnership, to help maybe design from the beginning with repair in mind and just doing things right.
It opens up this world so much more. It's interesting. I just read an article, and Walmart had just opened up in Florida another distribution center. It's a million square feet. But
Mhm.
the concept is they want to be in the US. They want to make sure that they then support some of the smaller businesses to say, hey, we want your product. We can help distribute it and make everything easy because we've got
Mhm.
our reach to different consumers, and just everything kind of functions very well. So I think that's similar to what you're saying, is that you're in a great placement, and now you kind of have the flexibility. Like you said, you could refurbish or you could say create something new. It doesn't matter because you guys are just positioned really well. So I think more and more people are going to have eyes on, this is the future. Forget, even if the tariff situation pans out okay, why are we not thinking this way, and why isn't this the future strategy for most companies?
Agreed. Yeah, and I would say, that nearshoring focus right now is really one of the more exciting shifts that we're seeing, is that, Mexico, it's not just an alternative, right? It could be a preferred hub for consumer
Yeah.
product, manufacturing. The advantage is that maquiladora ecosystem, right, is it's mature, right? There's a dense network of suppliers, there's skilled labor, there's educational institutions focused on developing that skilled labor, and there logistics providers to support everything from in our area specifically automotive to power
Mhm.
tools. I mean, you've got Bosch in market near us and Stanley Black and Decker and Whirlpool, and they understand that infrastructure is not only right for reverse, for manufacturing, but also for reverse. So it's a great opportunity, I think, for this continued focus on, build it, get it back, build it again, and keep on going. So it's fun to watch. It really is.
Do you think, or are you hearing rumblings? We know that with freight hitting the ports and not being able to go anywhere, and some freight never getting to go across the seas, logistically, it's going to cause a lot of issues temporarily, hopefully, but it's
Mhm.
going to raise costs and it's going to make it harder to get product to places. So, have you heard anything in the industry on that kind of playing field?
I hear the rumbles, from our clients as it relates to, trying to manage cost increases, being focused on, essentially some delayed supply chain tactics, on when they're going to bring product into country. Is there ways to essentially bring it into bond and only, ship kind of just in time to reduce paying the tariffs on all the product that came in? I look there's some supply chain heads way smarter than me trying to figure out how to manage this right now, and God bless them because it is strenuous, and the things the modeling they're doing, right, and it's changing so fast. And we had one of our clients, their comment was very interesting. They said, hey, the worst thing could have been is if it would just be end up being like a 25% tariff, right? Because then what you're doing is you're trying to figure out how to cost cut everywhere in the company to mitigate that, right? Because you're not going to be able to put through a cost increase related to that. He's like, but when it's 100 and something percent, Well, all the rule books, are just thrown out. It's just game on. We're rethinking everything. We're trying to figure out ways to partner, with the retailers better, and without just crushing the consumer, buying experience. And so it is fascinating to watch. I hope it ends soon, but I do hope that the outcomes from this is a better focus on nearshoring, and where it makes sense, you know, right in our backyards, right? Let's put it back here in the US as well, because certain things will still make sense, right? We're not going to be able to build a toaster or a coffee pot here in the US effectively,
Yeah.
that somebody wants to buy for 19.99. But, you could build $1,000 espresso machine probably.
It's so good. I think shakeups are good. I'm all about it. Granted, I want the small businesses, the big businesses to be okay, but I
Yeah.
love when the way things are being done is disrupted and there's alternative ways of looking at the future and saying maybe there's a better way to do something, or let's get
Yep.
creative, because that's the renaissance part of where, okay, they're doing this, they're doing that. It's new, it's fresh, and they're solving problems. So I'm curious to see. I'm with you. I
Mhm.
want to see how this all pans out. I'm wishing everyone well and success, but it's also
Okay.
okay, what changes are we going to see that are beneficial for the whole industry and that allow consumers just to be consumers and just say, I just need this product for my house and thank you for providing it for me.
Well, and here was an interesting one, and this kind of speaks to the kind of the global consumer base. It was something that had come up in conversation the other day with one of our clients that we're onboarding, right? So they're brand new to us, and they had actually hunkered down when the tariff piece happened from a US perspective, and looked outside and fast tracked their go to market strategies in other countries. They got launched in the UK, they got launched in Germany, they got launched in Italy. And they said it was because we could just turn away from, the US for a little while and just focus. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an unintended consequence, of the tariffs. But I think some of the insightful companies are saying, all right, well, I'll let that figure itself out for a little bit. Let me go, make sure I'm, taking care of all the other countries.
So true. It's funny. When you talk about this business in this industry, I was looking at some of the stuff that you've posted on LinkedIn and stuff. You often talk about it as being a little messy. But once you get through the mess and you're
Yeah.
guided correctly, there's just so much untapped opportunity. And so for you, is that kind of your mission? And you're positioned very well because of your title. You know the monetization and the revenue stream, and then you also have this. I want this to work. So I guess for me, I want to say like, how do you guide people? How important is that in part of your job?
It's a huge part. Um, I would say, I mean, it would sound maybe outlandish, but probably half of my role is really helping our current and prospective clients understand why this makes sense for their business. Um, and because there's typically competing priorities within a large organization. So at one point, the sales team may be saying, we don't want to do this anymore. We don't like this. And it's probably because, when you look at it, they don't get monetized on selling the refurbs like they do the
Mhm.
new. So of course they don't want to touch it. Or the finance team looks at it and says, man, this costs us money to do. But then the quality team will come back and say, yeah, but if we didn't do it, here's what we'd miss out on, right? We would have had a recall on this item, but we
Yeah.
caught it early on in the process because we were paying attention to the returns and we were able to put an ECN in place back at the factory. So a lot of the time, it's really about helping. It sounds funny. These departments talk together and get to know each other better, so that at the end of the day, they're all recognizing the value in the program. And we've seen it in our business when we don't take the time to make sure that every group we engage with is talking, then those programs tend to suffer. They're the ones that fall apart because some voice in the room got louder than everybody else, and maybe somebody wasn't in those meetings, and suddenly you got derailed. And but we've seen the best part is we've seen the inverse, right? Where a senior leader all the way up to a CEO during a big call, a monthly call, will say, "Hey, what are we doing about our returns?
Yeah.
Can somebody walk me through that?" And yeah, and we might have an internal champion that's like, "Yes, I'm diving on this one. I got it." And it's as much as building the right program for any of our clients is the most important thing, right? Helping them make good decisions about their product, helping them understand which products, yes, we're going to still receive them in that way. You can verify that the retailer, the credits they're taking is accurate, but we're not going to do anything with that, right? That
Mhm.
it doesn't make any sense to do anything with it. So let's recycle that properly. But these other items, let's focus on them. So it can be little things like that, from an educational standpoint.
It's funny, you need the buy-in. I always say that. We talk about we have a sales team and then a marketing team and an attendee team, and then we have corporate. And
Mhm.
sometimes we don't all align, but on the projects that we are all committed equally and we all understand, and sometimes we have to be spoken to differently to understand the common good of what can
Mhm.
happen if we all do the buy-in for that project. It's amazing what you can do as a team.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, if everybody's stroking the same way, right? It's
Yeah.
hey, they
So
boats work for a reason.
as a leader, what
Mhm.
are some of your attributes that you couldn't do without? How do you lead that you think benefits your team?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm a big believer. Just lead with clarity and consistency.
Mhm,
If I was going to chalk it up, I mean, years ago with my team, we had a really close knit team at my electronics recycling business, and we created this whole like book of like 74 different rules, and yeah, but they were some were just funny, but the intent was right. And but rule number one in that was no surprises, right? I never want my boss or my team to be caught off guard. Surprises just create anxiety. Anxious teams don't perform at their best. So, communication, transparency, really are the foundation of how we operate our business. um, Later when my partner and I were building ARC, which is the America's Remanufacturing Company that was purchased by Clover, our rule was don't lie to yourself, right?
mhm.
Be honest about what's working, what's not. At the end of the day, the problems don't solve themselves. Optimism can't replace objectivity. So face the challenges head on, even when it's uncomfortable. Go back in time and use the term "throw the dead cat on the table," right? I
Oh.
mean, you you got to expose it, right? And then, from a sales perspective, probably the one of the most important things I've always tried to make sure is, celebrate the wins, and but learn from the losses, right? Take the time to recognize progress, but also talk about the misses, own them, right? Because every stumble is just a chance to get better. And if you go into it that mindset of I can be better, I learned from this, then you're going to grow. And it's good for our team. It's good for our client partners. You know, and probably the most important thing, right, is at the end of the day, I don't have all the answers. And it's about creating a culture where it's not afraid. My team isn't afraid to ask a question. They're not afraid to try a bold solution, and
Mhm.
I shouldn't be either, right? If they try something and they can say the logic for why they tried it, even if it failed completely, great. Your logic was sound. It didn't come out the way you thought it was going to. So great. Keep throwing the spaghetti on the wall. Let's go figure this out. But yeah, I'll stick with those three rules.
Communication to me is everything because it's the one thing it seems so simple, but it's
Yeah.
very difficult for companies to equip their employees and staff to do. And I'm one of those people, that's why I love a phone call over any kind of text message or email, because if I'm
Yes.
in a bad mood, I could read that email and all of a sudden my eyebrow
Yes.
goes up. I go, they're yelling at me because they used cats or something like that. I'll just misinterpret it.
Hmm.
And no, they just accidentally, they were rushing because they were on a call or something, but they just wanted to tell me the good news. So it's as simple as, are we reading the emails and the texts the right way? And then also, hey, here's my expectations for our group. And we were all committed. Does anyone need more clarity? And that
Yes.
goes a long way. And it's so simple, but it's the hardest thing to execute sometimes.
It is. My wife will remind me too that that there are days where I think I'm being perfectly clear in my communications, and it's quite obvious that I'm not.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank God we marry people that tell us, are also use rule number two and don't lie to
Yeah.
us or themselves. So
There's that dead cat again. No. It's funny
just
too because you also mentioned you said sometimes I think that we have an idea, but we don't know how to explain it to the group. It's in our head and it could be the most fabulous idea, but sometimes you need to walk it out and it sounds a little shaky. So having a safe space where
yes.
you can say, I've identified these three elements. I just don't know how to pull everything together. But if we can do it and now the whole team understands what I'm talking about, oh, there's a whole new opportunity for you and it can be amazing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's funny that it can be little things. About a year ago, one of the new services that we started offering was dual source validation.
Oh,
Um, because even though a year ago, some of our clients were trying to pull a little bit of their manufacturing out of China, looking at Indonesia or Vietnam and other places, but they didn't have the staff here to be able to take the product being built on two different lines in two different countries and do a full analysis of that product. Is it performing the same way? Is it built the same way? Is the material selection as dictated? And became a brand new service because we listened and we
mhm.
said, well, we can do that. That's just an engineering service. We can set that up for you tomorrow. And it's actually become a very big part of our business now, is just dual source validation.
And who would have thought?
I know. Yeah.
But you listened to your client, and that was
We
good. That's
listened.
where it came through.
Yep.
So,
All about listening.
we're gonna wrap it up, but I can't leave
Okay.
this conversation without talking a little bit. You're hitting the road soon. You're very
Mm.
active. You like to go make the connection, shake hands, explain what it is that you do, and all that fun stuff. You're
Yeah.
also a great client of ASD Market Week. So, I always need help when I'm explaining ASD Market Week to people who have never been because it's very different than a lot of the other shows that are out there. So how would you explain ASD to somebody who's never been there before?
It's funny. I've had to answer that exact question with some friends, right? Because a lot of my friends they kind of understand, what I do. It's easier if you say I'm a lawyer. People go, oh, okay, you're a lawyer.
Yeah.
If you go, I typically just say, have you ever bought anything and returned it? Okay, then yeah, I'm the guy. But it's explaining ASD. So, was it 2 years ago? I think it was 2 years ago when we exhibited. That this story took place, but we have some really good friends and they were going to be out in Vegas. They're actually cruise planners, and there was
Oh,
a conference for them going on. And yeah, a million ways to make money in this world, right?
yeah.
And so we're like, hey, we're going to be out there too. We've got a booth at ASC Market Week. And they're like, what is that? I'm like, you have to come experience it. It's if you want to source product and potentially even be overwhelmed by the amount of things you could source on site, that's the place to go. And then recently, I was down in Key West, and I was at a kind of a little boutique branded clothing shop, and I was talking to the store owner, and I was like, "Hey, have you ever gone to ASC Market Week?" He's like, "I have actually. Yeah, I've gone there to like, go and source folks to do some, help with some of my branded product." I was like, "Wow!" It's so for folks who haven't been, if you are typically if you're selling online, if you've got any type of physical footprint, or even in this where I think it gets kind of interesting, for the promotional buyers, who are supporting, if they're doing auctions,
Mhm.
or even any type of, you just need to buy something in quantity on a regular basis. You've got, I've got a buddy who has uh, uh, essentially a traveling, um, basketball league that he runs.
Okay.
And so I was like, you should go out. You could probably find sources for the equipment that you need, clothing that you need, etc. So it's a great avenue for sourcing, sometimes even before you know what you want to source. You can
That's
walk
right.
around for inspiration. So it's inspirational, but also, there's some great opportunities there. And that's, I mean, we've had wins every time we've been at the show. We've met fantastic people that buy from us today and continue to buy. And refer us on to others, you know, for buying opportunities, and that's what we hope to get out of it, right? There's a reason we're all willing to sacrifice our feet and stand on a concrete floor for multiple days at a time, right? Yeah, it's not because we hate our feet; it's because we love the opportunity that's presented of engaging with so many people in such a small amount of time.
I love that explanation. It's so interesting because I always say it's the one place because it's been around so long for 70 years. It is the place where money can be found. If you have an
Yeah.
entrepreneurial mindset, you will go and you will find product that you know you can sell to someone, and it's unlike any other experience that you go to. And I think that even our exhibitors, so you're an exhibitor, right? You have your
Hmm.
booth. A lot of our exhibitors will walk the floor because there's opportunity. They'll find something at somebody else's booth and say, "Hey, I've got a buyer for this. So I'm going to buy
Yep.
it from you and then I'm going to go sell it to my client." So there's so many different avenues of business. You just have to be open enough to walk, explore and see what it looks like. So I was very happy to see you on the floor because I don't think there are a lot of you in terms of
Hmm.
what you specifically do, which makes you stand out. So I'm very appreciative that you come out to the show. Who's been the most like interesting person that you've met? Or from what like has it been a country that you're like, oh, I didn't think that they would be here, or was it just a certain kind of retailer?
That's interesting. You know, the countryside or country of origin for some of the buyers has sometimes shocked me, and not a
Mhm.
specific one, but just in conversation, like, oh, wow, you came this far, to come source product. I would say I'm always in awe of the number of one or two unit operators that are in this, in the world, right, in America, that are coming to buy product to support their store in a town I've probably never heard of.
Yeah.
But they've created a buyer base in a market that I've never heard of it, but they're sustaining their families. They have employees, and I'm just impressed, right? Because I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and
Yeah.
so to see all these micro entrepreneurs from all over the place coming to buy and support their business, it's awesome.
It's pretty inspiring. So
Yeah.
before you and I leave,
Yeah.
I want to have your final advice. So anyone that's coming into the resale space,
Mhm.
what do you got for them? Hang on tight, hold on. There's lots coming your way. Or what kind of advice would you give for somebody coming into this space who's never really experienced it before?
Um, well, start with refurb, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, you get to check the box on sustainability. There's a whole, kind of millennial and Gen Z that love the refurbished product because they're very committed to that mindset. But the other part is the tide comes in, the tide goes out, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, don't worry about tomorrow. It, as we know from most recent days, it will change.
Yep.
um the only thing you can focus on is, have you done your analysis? Do you have a go to market strategy, and do you have the funding to get you through? And so if you need to, you start scaling back a little bit. Maybe you make smaller buys and start building up your coffers that way. I'm a big believer in everybody should have a side hustle. So maybe it's your side hustle to start because it helps you think differently. So it allows you to maintain your day job while you start to build a secondary business. But go and explore. It's a At the end of the day, it's not an expensive show to attend, right? It's mostly your cost to get there and your cost to
Yeah.
stay there. But going to the show is cheap. And so come into the show and just learn, and then find folks that are focused on products that you may know or products that you're interested in, and just see what you can build together.
What a great way to end. And I'm going to recommend that everyone watching and listening, Paul's an incredible person. He's got extensive knowledge within this space. I'm going to actually probably put in the links. You did a 3-minute video, you and your team, that just shows the facility and just the
Mhm.
craftsmanship and just the passion of refurbishing products so that it can go back out there. So I'm going to make sure that that gets put into the link because
Awesome.
you're definitely a person to just have a conversation with. And I think your company's doing amazing things
for the environment,
Thank
for
you.
the industry, and your growth is only going to be, it's just going to keep going upward.
I appreciate that. It's a fun space. And I really appreciate you allowing me to be on this with you today. I had a lot of fun. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We want you to be a part of the show, so let us know who you want to see and what stories you want to hear. Leave us a comment and make sure you like and subscribe.